Everyone, hello. Welcome to part two, or I guess the next part, the sequel of our podcast episode with Zain. Nico, Zain, how y'all doing today?
Fantastic.
Doing
Real
great.
quick,
Thank you, Josh.
yeah, real quick, I want to ask, how's the weather going on, like where y'all at? Because back here at home, today is like 2 degrees, and I'm freezing.
We've
Well,
been
where I'm at,
experiencing quite a heat wave in Boston. And by heat wave, I mean 50 degrees, but
that's pretty
next
good.
week
Yeah.
is going to go down to like 0 degrees.
Yeah,
Today the weather hit 86 degrees here.
I hate you. I hate
Well, I
you.
guess that's Florida for you.
Yeah. And I was kind of surprised when I came from Tampa to Orlando. It's actually warmer in Orlando than it is in Tampa. So
I mean, it's like 40 minutes away, isn't it?
it was 2 hours. So, but yeah,
Keyword is like 45 minutes away.
what's
What's up?
that?
I
said
said
like,
you've been traveling all around, haven't you?
Yeah,
From place to place. That's good.
yeah. But let's get into our investing talk.
Yes.
So, what's our first topic? Let's
I think
start
the-
with real estate.
Yes, the last part we left off was kind of talking about how the housing market is getting affected. And just my 2 cents on what I believe in the housing market is currently we're in such a crazy economic disaster right now, where the bubble is constantly growing, deflating slightly, then growing more, deflating. And we did reach, once again, the U.S. debt ceiling of 31.4 trillion.
Mhm.
And with that, there's probably going to be some more adjustments from the Federal Reserve, which can impact the interest rates, borrowing, and spending of individual companies as well as the housing market. So, I mean, I just saw in Massachusetts the average price for buying a home has gone up by 0.5 to 1% than it was in the previous year, and that's just going to continue to grow. So imagine putting down a mortgage for $1 million house. What you're paying every year, even the interest fees that you're paying in for every month of that annuity is going up like crazy.
exactly.
Yeah. And the other interesting thing I saw recently was I was looking over, I believe it was like I think it was earnings statements from one of the home builder companies, and their numbers were down. Like some of their numbers, like for the different ways they make money, were down like 70 to 80%. So a lot of these home building companies are definitely struggling out there.
Yeah, I mean, well, as the cost of raw materials also goes up, building a home is also going to be more expensive.
Mhm.
But financing these homes through a mortgage or through a bank is also going to be increasingly difficult, as banks are more reluctant to give out these loans as well as demanding higher payments. So it really comes down to, if you are in real estate and using it as a profit-making stream of income, perhaps the break-even point is going to be so far stretched out where it's not exactly worth going into real estate right now and looking
Well, okay, there's one thing I want to bring up though. So I was talking to one of the guys. Have you seen the app out there? It's being advertised. It's an app called Fintor.
I think I've heard of it, yes.
Okay, that's like it's almost like it looks like the real estate version of Robinhood, pretty much. That's pretty much what they're trying to do, where you can buy like fractional shares. Well, anyways, I was talking to the guy who, I don't know if he's a co-founder or whatever he works for them, and he said that the difference though is, even if we're going into a recession and times are tough like they are right now, some real estate properties are still going to maintain their value, and you're really going to only see some prices plummet if they're like a higher end property. So there is that part of it too. Some properties will maintain their value better than others.
I think it depends on, one, the location of the actual property is a big thing. Some locations are appreciating like crazy, even if it's in the same city, a block in one really populated place, or if there's like really big buildings or prestigious companies. This actually happens a lot in San Francisco, where you have all these big companies like DoorDash and Uber.
Yeah.
But one block is going to be way more expensive when you can get something down the street that gives you the same real-time value, but the actual dollar value of that is going to be a couple more $1 million than what it's actually worth.
Yeah.
So
Yeah,
a lot of
but at the same time, though, with those cities you're talking about, let's say like San Francisco is one example, where a lot of those corporations that were in those cities, where pre-pandemic the employees had to live in those cities to work there. And meanwhile, now, what's a point that Josh brings up all the time is that people can do these jobs remotely now. So the demand for living in those cities with those corporations is not as high as it was 3 or 4 years ago.
I did actually see an article about that a couple of weeks ago, that the demand for more rural locations is going up, and that's actually giving more profitability and boosting the growth, at least in small towns.
Okay.
Yeah. It's kind of like they're making like new towns, kind of like
Yeah.
like, a lot of rural areas they're building.
Shockingly enough, though, theoretically on paper, the prices in the city should be going down, but conversely, they've actually been going up.
Mm-hmm.
And I personally feel like that might be due to factors that are outside of real estate, more towards federal policy and fiscal policy as well.
Yeah. Yeah, because I feel like those cities almost have like pricing power, because like, let's say New York City, for example, there's only one New York City. That's like a bunch of people want to live in New York City, but it can only hold so many people. The other thing I thought was interesting, I heard this on another podcast. They were talking about when employees relocate to other cities or other towns, does that mean they should still be earning the same amount of money as what they were earning before? Because was that baked into their salary of them having to live in San Francisco, for example?
That's a good point.
I think it really depends on how much work they're getting done at the end of the day and how big of an asset they are to the company.
Mm-hmm.
And this actually does get a little bit into inequality of pays in the workplaces, which is a huge problem now, especially based off gender and race.
Mm-hmm.
But you do have, even if someone is of the same demographic, you do have people to people that are getting slightly different ranges of salary, and you even have people that are more junior than some of the seniors in the company getting paid even more. So it's up to what kind of deal they're making with HR, with how much work they're getting done. But it depends on the kind of company and the leadership it has. For example, Elon Musk's version of Twitter, having the employees come work at the office, even building a hotel in the Twitter headquarters. That is one of the baselines of working at Twitter now. But there are some other companies out there right now, at least, where it's solely based off whatever you put in, whatever you get out.
Yeah. And what I've also heard about this, let's say in reference to the Twitter situation, the employees, when Elon Musk got there, he was firing a bunch of the employees. I heard that for employees like that, if the ones that were fired from Twitter, when they're back on the street looking for new jobs, they should have a ton of different offers from other tech companies looking to hire them. So even if Elon Musk doesn't want to give them the best of conditions, they should have they should have an easy time going to find another good job.
Yeah, like I agree, but that can also come on the side of like, when I'm looking for a job, it's not always easy, like for some people to get a new job as well. So maybe like
I agree. I agree if it's me or you, but if we're talking about someone who worked at Twitter, I think it's a different story.
You think someone at Twitter can get like an easy job at Google just like that?
I think so.
I mean, again, like the whole labor market, at least right now, there is a surplus of labor, especially with all these layoffs, and more employees, potential employees, are entering the labor market. But there are times when there's actually a labor shortage, and people can actually be choosy as to what company they can work with depending on what kind of benefits they get. That being said, there are those few outliers that will only settle for the best of the best and the best perks they can possibly get, and will choose to be unemployed or self-employed rather than working for a company that gives them, not the best benefit.
Yeah, and that labor issue is going to get worse if artificial intelligence takes more jobs away from us too.
That's also true. I mean, I was playing around with ChatGPT again this week, and just the endless possibilities that you could do with it are completely insane. And you can actually use that kind of artificial intelligence. You can ask it a first round of questions, then ask it a second round of questions based off the answer the artificial intelligence gives you from the first round, and constantly have the AI run through it over and over and over and over again. Finally, you get this masterpiece of a plan or a work or just anything you need to proceed through your day. And I feel like there was actually, I was doing this in one of my classes actually, where I was so reliant on the ChatGPT and the server completely crashed. And I was completely lost for like 5 to 10 minutes. I remember I got cold called for one of the questions to participate. And I was like, oh, shoot, the ChatGPT's down. What am I going to do? Now I need to actually use my brain and compute this.
Yeah.
But, you know,
at the same time, it's also cool to see, like, I think it's not just about ChatGPT. It's also about these other websites and programs that are doing things like, you know, they can create like album artwork, or they can create, you know, there's all these different things that the AI can do. Yeah, there's so many different things. So, I mean, that also brings us into like what I'm interested in seeing what the next revolution of jobs is going to look like. Like, is it just going to be about coding and computers, or is there some other options out there?
I'd say we already
are in a revolution now.
I'd say we already are in the fourth revolution now, because the first one was about steam power and mechanical. The second one was about using electricity and how to harness it. The third one was more about IT and utilizing it into security applications. Now this fourth revolution is based off augmented reality, AI, biochemical diversity.
Well, okay, I guess you're right. I mean, I think it comes down to what degree of automation is in each stage, because let's say this in the internet stage, like, yeah, we have the internet and it does stuff for us, but it still requires a human to come on here and do some work, which 20 years from now, I don't know if we can say the same thing, because some things get so automated now with different types of software that there almost is no need for a human to intervene if the software can completely do it on its own.
I say what defines a revolution in that case then, and I'll go back to a really old example, was when cars first came out. The demand for horse carriages and horse riders went down completely, and then the demand for learning how to drive a car went up exponentially. So the same thing is going to happen with artificial intelligence. The demand for some of these jobs that can be automated. You can even see this with autonomous cars as well, and Uber drivers, which will be a thing very, very soon. But you're going to need more people to operate and maneuver these AIs, and more people to go into the R&D of the AI and how to expand it.
Yeah.
And, you know, there's going to be less and less people needed for jobs that the AI can just take over. In my opinion, that is what constitutes a revolution, because it changes the whole educational system that our society needs in order to fill in the gaps and bridge into what is actually going to be pushing us forward.
And another interesting thing, Kathy Wood has brought this up for a couple of years now. She always talks about when, what's the best way to describe it? Like, when new technologies come out like this, it's a deflationary pressure on the economy. So that's also interesting too, because that's gonna help with our inflation problem. And she also says it's gonna create more jobs. So it'll be interesting to see how that all plays out too.
My best friend is a robot. I think that's going to be the future. But besides that, you guys want to go on to the next topic?
Yeah, besides our real estate, let's talk about virtual real estate.
Yeah, so there is the option, and this was primarily predominant when cryptocurrency was in its golden years, I think. But, you know, you could buy, I want to get into NFTs first, because this is how I think about it, especially with Ethereum and OpenSea, the marketplace for these NFTs. But, you know, as the coin was doing so well, and the actual the means of exchange for these coins, and, you know, where they're accepted, made the coin very, very profitable. So right now, because it's very hard to, for example, to go into a supermarket and buy a loaf of bread with a Bitcoin. So the inherent value of a Bitcoin is technically zero in some places. But when it was accepted on this OpenSea marketplace, you could buy digital real estate for millions and millions of dollars that would appreciate exponentially. So that was another form of an asset you could add into your portfolio.
And Josh, do you remember? So a while ago, I want to say at least a year ago, I downloaded this app called, forgot what it was called, but anyways.
Oh, you're talking about Upland?
I think it's Upland. Yeah.
Yeah.
So Upland was the app that I came across, and it's the same thing. It's digital real estate pretty much. And how you said, people had like $1 million plus worth of digital assets on there, and some of them also paid you rent too. So I put in like $30 just to experiment with it. I bought a couple properties, and I mean, I think the cool thing is like when you go into the app, you can click on real properties. Like I can buy a house in Nashville, and it'll show me what the house looks like on the app. So I thought that part was cool too.
I think it definitely is an asset, similarly to utilizing these technologies to make our lives easier. But just the possibilities of NFTs and even the metaverse, where you can buy a virtual plot of land that can appreciate and depreciate depending on its location, creating a whole what do you call it, your metamoji? No. It's something. It's what represents you in this
The
digital
avatar.
world. The avatar, yes. So you essentially live your entire life, and just imagine with all these other emerging technologies like augmented reality, virtual reality, that actually puts you in this world. So you imagine having the AI run your physical world, and then you're just escaping into this augmented reality world, or
it's just like the one movie,
Ready Player One.
Yeah, just like that movie.
Yeah. Okay.
It reminds me more of like Black Mirror, and just the whole craziness of the technology, of what it can actually do, and just where the world is going in the next 10 to 15 years. What is going to happen tomorrow. And it's so interesting how we live in this generation, how it's all possible, and what can even be possible after that.
Okay, let me get your opinion on something. So I want to talk about Facebook's role in this, and how they're building out the metaverse, and how they're putting so much emphasis on the fact that the metaverse is really going to be like $1 trillion opportunity. But I heard some guys the other day talking about, they were talking about how the metaverse shouldn't be, or it won't be as big of a deal, because people will not want to be, like almost like how you said, like people want to get away almost and escape their regular life to be in this virtual world. And they're like, the guys were saying, well, I don't think the majority of adults are going to want to do that. It'd really only be for kids. But I feel like I can see it becoming as big as gaming, and then I don't know. I think that would pretty much be the end of it. But what do you guys think?
Yeah, real quick before Zain go, I will say with different VR headsets, those start getting more popular year after year with gaming, things like that. I know the HTC Vive, like each one of those things, I think they started out like at $900. They keep going lower price, price. But that lower price is becoming a little bit more accessible.
Okay, but do you think it's mainly built around just like kids playing games, like it's more of a kid's toy, or do you think it's built more around adults, and can it be incorporated into the workforce and stuff like that?
I think actually some medical fields I might be wrong, but I think some medical fields are also like incorporating VR technology into how to operate with organs, different surgeries, things like that. So yeah, I still think we're still like early on with VR, metaverse, things like that, but I definitely think it's going to be a little bit more practical use towards it instead of just kids using it.
I think that, for one, before we even begin to talk about escaping into the reality, is we all have human bodies that need food, need water, and need electricity to power our systems that run the metaverse. This long list of necessary companies needed to survive. Because before we enter the metaverse, we need to be healthy and active and operational.
Right.
As the metaverse does grow, and we do shift into this digital world, if it does take off, that too, as more companies see the opportunities that lie in the metaverse, then the metaverse can become more mainstream. So right now, maybe it'll start as a gaming field or that early adopter kind of phase. And as more and more people and opportunities do shift in this direction, then even more opportunities and people will shift into this direction. It'll be kind of like an exponential.
Do you think that's possible?
Do I think it's possible? Yes. I do think it's definitely possible, but only if needs can be met. or rather, if needs can be created first and then met. So, for example, if there is a necessary job, if you need a digital realtor, then the opportunity will be created, and then there'll be a job seeker going around trying to get people to become this digital realtor by creating an avatar and specializing in the knowledge.
Yeah, but then the question is, if you get a job in the metaverse, do you get virtual money, or do you get can that translate into real life money?
I think that there will be some kind of conversion, similarly to how crypto works, where you can exchange it into dollars by selling your coin and exchanging it for actual US dollars or wherever in the world you are, the euro, the pound, whatever. But it's like keeping a balance in this metaverse. Having these meta dollars is going to be another asset to your portfolio. And as long as you have liquidity between exchanging these digital dollars into real dollars, then there will be inherent value to it, where you can actually, there is an incentive to grow this digital money to turn it into actual cash.
Okay, and another thing with this situation is, one of the benefits they often talk about crypto is how it's decentralized, right? How there's not one company or government controlling everything. Yep. Is that going to be the same for the metaverse? And what does that look like with is the metaverse decentralized, or is there a bunch of companies working in the metaverse, or I can't picture how that would work.
I say it's definitely possible for, if it does become big enough, then governments will, of course, intervene, and the fiat currency of the US dollar will they will create their own fiat currency in the metaverse, and have some sort of regulations with that. But again, it's too small for governments to really get into. Currently, it's just going to be run by Meta, and then as other companies, specifically those big blue chip companies, get into the metaverse, then there will be slowly an incentive for more and more people to get into it. And okay, enough people, then governments will start to intervene.
Okay, but couldn't you say the same thing about social media? Like, where do the big social media platforms sit as far as the corporation controlling the business versus the government intervening?
What comes to mind is corporations that seek to get too large are then stopped by antitrust laws. And this happens actually. This is not a social media, but it's actually Google and their whole control of data and
it's like anti-monopoly stuff.
Anti-monopolies is going to be a big one, and I definitely do see with more antitrust laws, if the metaverse does become big enough, at some point governments are going to impose their own antitrust laws for companies to actually open up into the metaverse.
Yeah, but the interesting thing is, even with those laws in place, like Facebook has gone, like since Facebook went public, over the last decade, they've dealt with this problem tons of times. Like, they violate one of the laws, and worst case scenario, they might pay $1 billion or $2 billion as a fee. But meanwhile, the company makes over $100 billion. So that doesn't really affect it. It's the same thing with Alibaba. Alibaba faces the same problems over there. So even with those laws in place, they pay a small fee, and then things keep, going the same way they always have.
Yes and no. They will. It is a small financial cost, but at some point, if there is too much of a need for the government to get involved, they could outright ban it on their government servers. Yeah. China, for example, they ban all types of social medias that are native to the U.S. and the rest of the world.
That's true.
Mainly because they see it as a detriment to their population and their economy.
That's true. And the United States is starting to ban TikTok, it looks like. So on
government use devices, yes. Mainly because of a privacy and information leak to potential Chinese
right. But I'm saying, I think there's politicians out there that are trying to push it a step further and get it into where nobody in America can use TikTok. So that would be really interesting if that happened, because I know how TikTok, like, they do, like, it says in their terms of service and everything, how they can, like, look at all the stuff through your phone just by having the app downloaded. So there is lots of suspicious things going on with that. But
yeah, I mean, well, the way TikTok utilizes it is they track your cookies and where you go on your website to get data for your For You page. So while the incentive behind doing that is to make your TikTok experience better, the fact that they have access to that data and someone could potentially get into that data and abuse it is mind-boggling, and which is why a lot of these politicians are looking in that direction to protect the individual rights and privacy of the people.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, y'all see that possibly happening? Like TikTok just one day is completely off our phone if you live in the United States?
I don't know.
I don't think the app would magically delete itself, but I do see that, getting into the app and then it says that the app is not permitted in your country, or, people would probably need to use a VPN in the United States. An example of this would be Hulu in Canada or other places outside of the United States, where the company itself would detect where you are depending on your IP address. And, if it's allowed, you're allowed in. If it's not allowed,
okay.
Gotta get
let me ask you guys this. Let's say you're sitting at a table with Mark Zuckerberg, and he's asking you, do you think that we should invest? Because I think they're planning to invest $100 billion over this year and the course of next year into building out the metaverse. That's why the stock is down over 50%, because the profitability is going to go down. But what do you guys think? Would you say yes, let's go all in on this and this is going to pay off, or would you say no, cut back on the spending and be conservative with the metaverse?
First off, I see it's a wonderful time to buy in, because Facebook went down 80% in 1 year, 60 to 80%.
Oh my God. I know it peaked at 400 and it bottomed at, I want to say 100.
100 and something, yes.
Maybe less.
About that much percent. I do see the metaverse coming back. I do see if enough advances are made into it, and if opportunities are created, like I said, then I definitely do see it as a potential asset to our lives.
Mm-hmm.
I also think that the development of emerging technologies like virtual reality, augmented reality, artificial intelligence, and some of the breakthroughs in energy saving, energy consumption, then these factors in place can actually speed up the growth of the metaverse itself. And if $100 billion is going, that has potential to create more opportunities, incentivize businesses to come on there, and slowly make that change into what Mark Zuckerberg is envisioning.
Because it's going to be super slow and gradual till we get to that point.
It is, and more dollars will need to be spent. It's a long-term project, but these things will take time. It's not going to just happen in 2024, 2025. It could take all the way up to 2035.
Mm-hmm.
So
yeah, that's what I think too.
There needs to be other advancements that need to be made gradually. And I think right now the world is really focusing on energy consumption, green energy by 2030. A lot of these companies are imposing bans and changes into their strategies to meet that ESG score that is required now of the public.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, the emerging technologies, they do have potential, but they need to follow certain regulations and trends and stay with the economy and the opportunities they can get.
Mm-hmm.
And hopefully for soon in the next 10 some odd years, maybe all the green energy stuff can be behind us,
But
well,
I think
why do you think that's going to happen?
Well, not behind us, but it's not like a main concern or issue.
Yeah,
like,
yeah.
Kind of like went past, we kind of like beat the problem. Kind of.
Yeah,
it'll become a new normal, I feel like, and all these kind of technologies, they first they go through the technology adoption cycle where you have those first group of people that find this cool thing and they're like, oh, this is awesome. I'm going to tell my friends about it. More people get onto it, and companies get onto it, opportunities are created, and slowly the shift starts being made. And then at some point, there becomes this point where you have laggards of saying like, oh, I wish I got onto that. I wish I could have had the opportunity because I would be so big on that platform or with that platform. So, as a lot of people going back to the metaverse or even green energy are making this change, you're going to have at some point where this becomes a new normal and people are more conservative and are clinging back onto this or trying to get to what is now required.
Mm-hmm. Zain, let me get your opinion on something. When you talk about, because we've mentioned this a couple times with the whole, what's the term for it when you go from early adopters to maturity to whatever? What is that process called?
The technology adoption stage.
Okay,
technology adoption cycle.
So sometimes when I'm looking at businesses and stuff, or I'm looking at industries, I'm thinking to myself, like, let's say these businesses like Coca-Cola, or let's say you're talking about, I don't know, alcohol business, a motorcycle business, like Harley Davidson, Coca-Cola, Jack Daniels, these companies are at maturity, right? What I'm thinking about is, do they ever face a situation where they start going down? Do they ever start dying out?
Yeah, well, so Coca-Cola is is a beverage. It's a physical beverage. I think it's very tough to connect Coca-Cola into the technology adoption cycle, because it's a physical consumptible product, and the same thing can be said for McDonald's, for Chipotle, for all these other fast food companies and beverage manufacturing companies. So they are a little different. They actually focus more on marketing and sustainability. As you do create, let's say you create your own brand of an alcoholic beverage, or a new juice, whatever you want to call it, something in the food or drink industry. At first, when you first make it, you tell your friends about it. You slowly gain that traction in the market, but you need to put a lot of your spending into getting that word out, making the process easier, being more friendly with how much is going into raw materials and the whole manufacturing process of it. Then you need to go into your wholesalers. Who are you going to sell in bundles and packages? How are these wholesalers going to reach their retailers? And then how are the retailers going to go into the end consumer? So you go through this entire marketing channel, and slowly by slowly, you also need to adjust your image with society by having a proper ESG score, being ethical in your company. The leadership needs to be there. Employees need to be treated right. Equal opportunity must be given, equal pay. Do all these factors, then also seeking public funding, engaging with smaller companies with Series A, B, and C funding.
So
enable opportunities where you can.
In other words, it's very hard to compete with Coca-Cola.
Yes, because they're already established. They're considered.
And at the same time, if the brands that do start to come up, like let's say Celsius is a good example, or Monster is a good example, those companies, companies like Coca-Cola, will buy those smaller companies out. So, but I guess my question is, can you picture a scenario where Coca-Cola goes out of business?
I do not think it is. Well, yes and no. So Coca-Cola is a unique product. They have their own recipe for the soda that's locked into God knows how many vaults. The recipe is closely guarded. It's kind of similar to the KFC recipe for KFC, but they can go out of business if there is. It's not going to be because consumers simply do not like the beverage anymore, but maybe there can be factors like extremist groups that are saying no to sugary beverages, or staying away from soda. This change into more of a healthy lifestyle.
I can picture that. I can honestly picture that, because we already see that a little bit to some degree. Over the past couple of decades, there is a little bit of a push towards less sugar and healthier items and all that stuff.
More smoothies, things like that.
Additionally, Coca-Cola, if it was to tarnish its public reputation, let's say the harvesting of the organic materials needed in the Coca-Cola recipe are harvested unethically, or if there is word that gets out that their ESG score or their inclusion score is going down, then they can get a lot of backlash in the public, and it can involve scandals. If there's scandals.
Or a scandal like they start putting cocaine back in the pop.
Yeah, I know, right?
That can also happen as well. But if it doesn't have to just be that. Like, it can be another product that is deemed unethical, or if their word gets out that their factories are releasing the wrong kind of gas in the ozone layer, then
okay. But hold on a second. So let's go back for a minute. If you look at other companies that do things like that, let's say Starbucks, Nike, those are huge corporations that have been caught doing things like that over the past however many decades, and they're still in business, right? They're still thriving today. So that's where I don't like a lot. It's just, it was the same thing with Facebook. Like, yeah, these lawsuits and stuff can come up and it might hurt the reputation or they might get fined, but it's going to be temporary, right? Because 5 or 10 years later, they're back on top of their game, just like Facebook, Starbucks, Nike, Coca-Cola are today.
Or they reinvent something new. Because I thought the tobacco industry, smoking cigarettes industry, was just about over.
That's a great example.
Yeah,
That's
they somehow come out with
these are kind of companies that really fall under the Warren Buffett, Berkshire Hathaway sense of investing.
But
because
so
there's always going to be a need for it. In 100 years from now, do I see Coca-Cola still being out there? I do. The same goes for Starbucks, for McDonald's. These have become part of our culture, essentially. You know, you do have some companies like that, like Google, like Apple, and Facebook is trying to do that with the metaverse. Tesla has been up and down.
Okay, so but going back to my question about the cycle, the business cycle.
Yeah.
Well, I don't know, is it a business cycle or technology cycle?
It's technology. Okay, so that's why it's very hard to connect this kind of cycle into like a consumable like food
with those restaurant companies. Okay, that makes sense. That makes sense. Okay.
However, the best way to connect it would be through, let's say, NVIDIA. They manufacture a new graphics chip within the first few months. You have the first people getting it, or not even NVIDIA. Let's go into something more simple, like Tesla has a new car, and you have the first few people switching to the car. They find it's great, although there could be more charging ports, but the saving you get on gas is great. It's up there. So they start telling their friends about it. They see the car. It's clean. It's nice. It has good service. There's a lot of retailing shops for support. The company is giving a lot more initiatives, and they're creating more charging stations. And slowly by slowly, you're having this change of you're having more and more consumers. More revenue is being made by the company, and you know, this is becoming more mainstream. That being said, you know, as Tesla does continue to grow, as this technology is being made, there are going to be potential competitors that are going to arise where they take Tesla's business model and say, I can do this better. I have something that is in this business model or in this product that I'm going to change a little bit.
Yeah.
I'm not going to infringe patents based on what Tesla has, but I think I can make my own competitive edge and target my own niche for that and be a competitor to Tesla.
Yeah.
So then you have this battle for market share.
The problem with stuff like that, especially in that certain industry, is one, this is debatable, but I personally believe all the competition is years and years behind and not even close. But number two is coming up as a startup in that industry. Let's say a company like Lucid or a company like Rivian. Those were smaller companies. It's a very costly business, and it's a very tough business to scale. That's why Tesla was so close to going out of business, because it costs, you know, $20 or $30 billion to scale up this business. And I personally think companies like Ford and GM and Toyota, I don't think they're even close. I think Tesla's data and Tesla's technology is years ahead. So
it's funny that you mentioned these smaller companies like Ford, GM, and Lucid and you know, Rivian. But I was actually looking at this a couple hours ago. That I saw an article that said that GM has this potential by 2030 to control more of a market share than Tesla because of how they're making their cars, how cheap it is, and because they have this reputation that, you know, there are this big car manufacturer. Ford can be the same way. You know, these other used to be mainstream car manufacturers, when they go into the electric vehicle industry and they make their own version of the electric vehicle, then all of a sudden Tesla loses its magical appeal that makes them unique in the market. Even though they are the first pioneer into the EV market and making all the R&D, you have these other people these other companies that simply just know how to get the consumer's attention because they have been the image.
But that's Tesla though. Tesla does a better job of that though. They do a better job.
They do the better job because they're the only mainstream EV car maker out there. But when the EV technology does become mainstream and so easily accessible and cheap to produce, who do you think is going to be the biggest?
Tesla by far.
Okay,
Yes,
but
the
say
Tesla charger-
now on a you go on a car lot. It's a Tesla. You usually just an electric car. It's just a Tesla. Now you go in there. It's a Tesla. It's a new BMW. It's
Okay,
a new.
this isn't new news though. We had this discussion 2 years ago on the podcast because it was new in 2020. It was new. That's when these companies announced it. So we're 3 years in now. Like this is like it's not a new thing that Ford made an electric vehicle. So the customers, they have options right now. Everybody is the people shopping for cars are aware that they have multiple different companies to choose from.
Now, that being said, what will constitute the rise, or rather the return of GM, Ford, and these other mainstream companies? It's one, Tesla is one of those car brands. It's not considered the best budgeted car if you're not thinking about the break-even point of the gas and the charging. Forget that for now. But I think the starting price to get a Tesla is between $40,000 to $50,000, depending on the model you get, depending where you get it. So there are cars out there like Nissan from Ford, from GM, that you can buy for less than $10,000, depending on who you get it from in the year. So as these budgeted cars do make a model, an EV that does cost that much, who do you think the 40 to 50% of the consumers are going to go to?
I think
they're going to get the electric Honda for $25,000. That's what they're going to go to.
Okay,
exactly.
Well, I don't know.
Exactly.
Number one, first of all, I think Tesla is going to come out with a $25,000 option. Number two is I think the competitors, their best chance at getting the other customers are going to be people who don't like Elon Musk. That's going to be their best chance.
Well, it's some people that just buy Toyota brand cars or just whatever cars are already.
How the leader in the company is seeing the public can make a small change, but I don't think it'll be so significant. I think what will also be significant is if
I agree with 99.9% of companies, but I think that 0.01% is Tesla because that company has somebody running it that everybody knows. Okay, everyone knows he's the richest guy on the planet, so he is much more popular.
Second richest guy now. He's now second.
Whatever. Okay, he'll be back. He'll be back up there.
I'm number one, baby.
LVMH fashion. But what GM and Ford actually have that Tesla does not have as well right now is they do have deals with these other companies like Hertz, like Enterprise, like these car rental companies that are also appealing.
Tesla already has that.
Not as much as Ford and GM, mainly because they don't have that deal with them. But that could also change.
But no, I remember this a little over a year ago. Hertz and Tesla did a deal for, I want to say, 100,000 vehicles. So there is that. That is out there.
So it's growing. In other words, it will take time, but it's one of those things that are going to take this small adjustment period, slowly by slowly.
I think the big thing is, okay, the pros of Tesla is, one, it has the reputation, whether it does it or not. It has the reputation of being good for the environment. Okay, that's debatable. But it has the reputation, at least. Number two is it's a luxury vehicle. People, they look at it like a spaceship or a fancy toy almost. The con of it, though, is how you said it's expensive. So I think that's the biggest thing they're battling right now to get to a maturity stage or a mass adoption stage. That I think how you said that's probably their only obstacle. Only obstacle is getting down to like a $25,000 vehicle. Then that'll change the game.
That's going to come. The design is nice. That's another thing that we got to factor in. The design of the car, how the car looks. That's another.
I think Tesla is a beautiful looking car. I've heard some people say the complete opposite, but I think there's a lot of people that would agree with me.
I think it depends on the model. I think the Model S, like the sedan, I think that one looks nice. But the SUV, not for me personally.
Now I will say that the Cybertruck, I'm not a huge fan of. I think that's one of the weirdest.
Oh yeah, that's ugly too.
Yeah.
I think that any entrepreneur, especially Elon Musk, he had this vision to make EV cars mainstream, and he's really focusing on shifting the industry in a direction where everyone can use. He has his own ideals of improving our technology wherever possible, and that's why he created PayPal in the beginning. That's why he made SpaceX. He's trying to advance us, Neuralink, the Boring Company. So he's really capitalizing on what can drive us forward. And you're
Yeah.
gonna have these other companies out there like the Ford, the GM that are already established out there since the times of what Rockefeller did in finding oil.
Right.
But
they're not trying to push the technology like somebody like Elon
no,
Musk.
exactly. But they're solely in it for the business. You know, their time, I hate to say this, was in the past, but you know, they still do have the potential to come back as an automotive manufacturer. It's a big pioneer in the market, even in EV market.
Well, and yeah, I mean, there's one thing to say, okay, they need to catch up as far as terms of EV, but that's not to say that they're like, you know, they're still a dominant business out there. But something you just said, me and my friends talk about this all the time, and that's companies like Ford or GM or just any of these big corporations. Is there a possibility they go out of business? Or because what you see is you see governments back and they backstop when these companies are about to go out of business. So I don't know if that's even possible really for Ford to go out of business, because
Ford did enter a period where they did foresee bankruptcy. I think it was 2 or 3 years ago.
okay.
Yeah, about 5
And
years.
they did get a subsidy from the government.
Yeah.
That was able to put them back on track. But you know, as these companies are existing and playing catch up, Tesla has that opportunity to keep on moving forward while these guys are catching up. So you know, a whole change in strategy needs to be made. Otherwise, they're always going to be those secondhand producers that are just making mass productions to market through that 20, 40, 50%, however much of the market share they can actually get. But they're never going to get more than 60, 80%. That's always going to be controlled by Tesla, because you're going to have these people that are going to want the bleeding edge of the technology.
Mm-hmm.
And that being said, you're also going to have that 5% of the market share that Tesla's never going to be able to get, because you know there are people out there that simply just do not agree with Tesla's ideals, with the leadership, that simply like these other smaller companies like Lucid Motors, like NIO, like you know, et cetera, all these other ones. But
And it's a whole other thing. Like we mentioned this in part 1, but when governments or politics comes into place and they say, okay, we're banning ICE vehicles, that's a whole different story too. That totally messes with the normal supply and demand that would be there if there's laws in place like that.
Yeah.
So we will see.
But I think this is a good segue to back into entrepreneurship, of how, you know, anyone starting a company, they need to really look at the company as an extension of themselves. I tell everyone, a lot of people that ask me questions, especially now that they hear that I'm doing my own startup, is you need to find something that you're willing to really work on, that you're committed to, and see the development and raise it like your own child, essentially. I know that does sound cliche, but you really need to be on top of it. Research your competition, research your market of who you're selling to. But do you guys want to talk a little bit about entrepreneurship?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, I actually had a question too. So obviously, just with life in general, but even with entrepreneurship, there's gonna be like some hard times, rough moments. How do you exactly like try and get past those rough moments, and like just trying to keep going like that?
Yeah, so that's a really good question, Josh, and I'll actually come back to this in a little bit. But before we touch upon, you know, how an entrepreneur can really push through these boundaries and when they hit walls, I recommend every entrepreneur should first create a list, and you can call this my personal list. I recommend, you know, to anyone watching this video, to anyone aspiring to be an entrepreneur, but just hear me out. It's a 10 figure list, and it starts with, first you need to find your own ideals. What matters to you? What do you stand for? What's your goal? Second thing is you need to create your own personal brand and live by it. So what is your personal brand? Is it arriving to meetings on time? Is it helping out others wherever you can? Is it dressing up nicely to every meeting? Is it being very social? You know, all these other things, these rhythmic patterns that define who you are, that becomes your personal brand and how others see you. Number 3, make connections wherever possible. You need to get out there and network wherever possible. And then once you have a strong background of people, then you need to filter out who can really help you who can support you in your idea and aid you in your journey. This doesn't just have to be in entrepreneurship. This could be in life and personal in general. But just keep in mind that your network is your net worth, essentially.
Mhm.
Number 4, you have to explore as much as you possibly can. You can't just stay in your basement, in your room all day. You need to get out there. You need to travel. You need to see places with your own eyes and experience them. This actually comes to mind when I am quite a traveler. I've traveled a lot throughout Europe and Asia, and all over the United States and North America. And I would not have had the idea of where to start my own company if I had not had the opportunity to see these places in real time, rather than just hearing what is given on social media.
Mhm.
Friends tell me, you have to see it. You have to get out there and see it yourself.
Mhm.
Number 5, you need to set time for yourself. When things get busy, it can really become tough, and this becomes a necessity. You need to find the fine line between what is when you work, when you relax, and whether it be through meditation, exercise, having the proper diet, creativity, whatever you need to do it. But number 6 is kind of a continuation of the number 5, is try to train yourself over time to see how much time is needed to set aside in relaxing to recharge your batteries, and see if you can slowly train yourself to make that more time efficient. So relax efficiently, as in try to condense the time you need to relax. If you need to start out working and you dedicate 10 hours to yourself, 2 hours goes into relaxing, whether it be through arts and crafts, through exercise, through anything to distress, and 8 hours goes into sleep. How can you decompress that time to 7 hours of sleep and 1 hour of relaxing? So that way you can create more time into working.
Mhm.
When you do have your these 6 things into place, then you can start moving into your actual business idea. So, the 7th thing on the list is creating the idea that is an extension of your own passions. This goes upon that first point of finding your ideals and what matters to you and what you stand for. The idea should be an extension of what you stand for. For me, for example, it's problem solving and making lives more efficient and easy. Hence why I came up with the drone delivery system.
Mhm.
But number 8 then becomes research. You need to use those connections that you made. If your network is your net worth, leverage that network to your advantage. Try to find, keep your eyes open, read all the news. The same thing happens when you're first investing into the stock market. You need to watch all the news, read all the articles, and especially in the companies that you trust, you need to know everything. And not just everything with your company, you need to also read what can affect your company, what could be a potential disaster or an opportunity for your company later. Number 9. Ask yourself, do you really want to do this? What will happen if your idea becomes super successful? What is the next step? And this kind of goes into your question, Josh, of what do you do when you hit that brick wall? So first you need to ask yourself, why did you even start in the first place? What am I going to get out of this? How am I going to help the people around me? What is it going to mean if I actually do this? There is, and this also goes into the final point of my list, but that is to make the first move. A lot of people have this issue where they don't know where to start. And sometimes that's usually the case actually with a lot of people. But as you do make the first few steps, and even though the path may not seem clear, as you do make those first few steps, the path then becomes increasingly clearer and clearer, because maybe you'll do something, maybe it won't be to how you imagined it, maybe it'll be a failure, but it'll teach you how to pivot in the future to get over that wall.
Mhm.
So when an entrepreneur does become stressed out and they think that everything is going to come failing and crashing, really leverage your experience and see what you can take out of that to move forward for next time. But that is just the list I have for entrepreneurs in general. I have a secondary list as well, once you do have your list, but this one's actually much quicker.
No, that was a great list. You hit all the important things there.
Yeah, that was a great list. Yeah.
There's a couple things I want to go back to talk about. And there's a couple things I want to ask you. One of the things I want to ask you is about when you talked about traveling and starting your own business, did that have anything to do with the business, with the specific business idea you started? Did you see anything out while you were in another country or something that inspired you?
Yeah, so this traveling point actually goes into the long lines of keeping an open mind. An example of this was when I went to LA and I first met you. That was very spontaneous, and here I am on this podcast today. But I went there on a family vacation, and I saw LA for what it was. I even decided to do a year of school in San Francisco last year to experience, because I heard a lot about San Francisco and California, it being a potential place where I could start my idea. And after traveling to these places, whether it be through spontaneous, whether it be through doing something, I was able to learn where would be the best place to start my idea. Because when you're going through the research process of filtering where would be the best grounds to really grow this idea, you need to see who are going to be the best sort of people to get the idea up and running. Are you going to be able to get funding accessibly? Are your investors going to be close by? Are your other stakeholders going to be close by? Learning the key players in the industry that is around your industry, and who are the big key players in that area is also going to be key.
So,
but yeah, keeping an open mind, being spontaneous, that's a big thing.
So how come, okay, where are the other drone players at? How come there isn't a popular drone company out there right now?
The popular drone companies are very small companies. They're in Canada, they have like Drone U Canada. It's Ontario based, very small. But another one would be Amazon, based in Washington. But they are all over. They're over globally. So headquarters is something that is, if it's going to be the first location. I personally chose LA because there's a lot of regulation with the FAA. Of being able to pilot drones off a certain altitude. LA, for the most part, not the downtown area, is a large suburb with, the houses are not too high up in the sky. So that makes it a very easy place to fly drones, provided the drones can fly in a certain pathway that is avoid large crowds of areas.
And you don't have to deal with snow from the sky.
Additionally, yes, the weather in Southern California is very forgiving. Especially for drones. But that being said, in Miami, where it rains all the time for an entire season, that's also going to be an issue and a liability to work out.
Well, the interesting thing is, I've been in Florida. I've been in Florida now for 4 weeks. It's only rained 1 or 2 days I was here.
That's crazy to me.
Yeah,
it's like every time I'm in Florida, it rains for like nonstop for like 20 minutes, and it just stops.
Yeah, I know. Right, I've seen that before too.
It's like a monsoon for like a good 30 minutes.
Okay. The important thing is that when you do have this first place, it's about starting and paving the path for the future. If you consider all these different points, where is my business going to be in the next year, 2 years? While that is good to keep in the back of your head, you need to start in the first month. If you're in the pre-seed stages, which is where I'm currently at, you need to focus on the launch itself. What's going to happen on the launch? And then you can start focusing on how is the cash flow going to be made? How is the business going to stay afloat?
Okay, what stage are you at right now as far as
pre-seed stage? So this is past FFF, engaging into Series A funding.
Have you gone to any like there's different types of events like what's the word, like whether it's a funding event where you like a pitch competition. I've done those before. There's a couple different ones where you either network or you pitch your idea to try to get funding, or you get like grants and sponsors. Have you tried any of that stuff?
Yes, just give me 1 second, sorry. So yes, actually, my institution does offer an accelerator, but because the theme this year is not up to the standards of what my idea is centered around, it's impossible to really progress into that competition. But I am looking at other accelerators like Y Combinator, if you've ever heard of it. It's a national competition where you can pitch your idea and network with other investors and entrepreneurs alike. So yes, it's a process that can backpack you out of the pre-seed stage. A lot of people, they go into crowdfunding, they go into angels, they get funding from their family. But this is kind of like, this accelerator is a way to skip that step and go right into the Series A, B, C funding.
Now, one of the other things that stuck out to me on your list was when you were talking about extending the people you know and your network and your connections and all that stuff. I read a quote recently that said, your network times the value you can provide will equal the opportunities that are available to you.
I'm sorry, could you repeat that?
Yeah, the quote said, the value you can provide times the number of people you know equals the amount of opportunities you have.
I think that you should take that with a grain of salt, because it's never a numbers game. I think that if anytime you think your network is a numbers game, then you really need to reevaluate
really
your intentions of going into like a networking event or meeting people where you can, because there can be people out there, for example, that could actually give you opportunities that could serve as something that could bring you lower to what you're aspiring to be.
You're right.
If you get mixed into the wrong crowd, your net worth.
So you think quality is more important to look out for than quantity in this case?
I think quality is definitely much more important than who you network
to. But would you also say that increasing the quantity is also gonna? You don't think that increasing the quantity is going to increase the quality? It's going to increase your chances of meeting more of the people that will help you.
Yes, that is true. You can definitely, if you see potential that this person has connections. First off, I say that everyone should be a good person and just be friendly wherever they possibly can, and extend having those good intentions with everyone you meet, no matter who it is. Even if you're in an elevator with someone completely random. I always recommend, it's just something to live by. It's an ideal. But yes, it's you only have a finite amount of time. So it's up to you to choose where to spend that time and how much time you should spend with certain people to really get the most out of it. Are they strictly just your friend? Are they strictly just a business partner? Assigning them to these groups in your head, I think is what people do unconsciously. And then slowly by slowly, they kind of, depending on what they need, if they're just relaxing and having a good time, they'll go to their friends. If they're needing something in the same industry or ideas for brainstorming, then they're going to go to these other people that are in their industry. If they're going to go to work on projects, they're going to go to their colleagues or their team. The list goes on. And maybe you walk into like a shopping mall and you make a small talk with someone in an elevator, and before you know it, you guys become closer, and then the guy says that, or woman says that they know someone that could help you. So then that becomes a quick connection you can make just by connecting with the person, and so you're able to leverage your skills and communication skills to get someone even greater.
Right. Yeah.
But I think that as I said, an analogy I used earlier was treating your company like a child. But I like to also use another analogy when you're starting a company, is treat it like, have you ever played the game Pirate and you have your own pirate ship?
Oh yeah.
You first need to build your own pirate ship, right? You need to make sure the hull is strong. You can't make sure it sinks if off a bad tide. Once you make your ship or build your ship, you need to gather the right crew. Who is going to be able to go where on the ship? You need someone that's a navigator, or at least if you're the navigator, then that's fine too. But you need someone that's skilled to repair the sails if something goes wrong, repair the cracks in the wood if something goes wrong, who has survival skills if you guys go on an island. Then when you do have, you need to be able to learn how to navigate a storm. You need to have sight of your destination. And you also need to consider if you're going to stop on islands along the way, and what would you do if you were to find like a treasure map somewhere on your journey. And
is this your secondary list?
this isn't my secondary list is more formal on when you actually have an idea, and this is actually stuff I do go over when I have someone that asks me for more logistics. I'm happy to share that as well. It goes into R&D and funding and sales and market strategy, but we can go into that too if you want. But this is just an analogy I came up with before this podcast.
So one thing I was thinking of when you were reading off your list too was like I'm not sure this will I don't know if this can apply to every single business, but something that Warren Buffett and Steve Jobs talk about a lot, they both gave speeches on this before, was you need to be very passionate and interested in what you're doing in your business and in your day-to-day life, working for that business. So I like to follow that principle too, but at the same time, do you feel like some businesses are not going to always be something that you're very passionate about? Like, are you passionate about drones?
So this is a multi-part question. What Warren Buffett and Steve Jobs were saying about being passionate, that comes from letting the business and the incentives be an extension of your own ideals.
Mm-hmm.
Having your core, having your image made into the form of a business
mm-hmm.
is going to come a long way, and it's going to be like that time flies when you're having fun. You're going to enjoy what you're doing.
Yeah.
That being said, there are going to be some entrepreneurs out there that are more serial entrepreneurs that go from business to business. And, they're only doing it so once their business reaches a certain point, they're going to go through a merger acquisition and go to the next idea.
Yeah.
If that is how they do it, perhaps their ideals or their incentives behind the business is simply to either to problem solve, to create an idea and manifest it in the form of a company.
Do you believe that you can be equally successful though, whether you're going down the route of something you're passionate about or not passionate about?
I think it's definitely possible. But again, it really comes down to the individual person themselves.
Mm-hmm.
It's similar to my father, of how he was always a finance guy. That's why he's trading options now. But he's found the opportunity to go into IT and electronics, and then ended up taking him to pharmaceuticals, and then now he's doing what he enjoys.
Mm-hmm.
But
and go ahead.
Me personally, I came up with this idea from problem solving of how I can make the issue easier. There was a time in this was my junior year of high school where I had a debate case. And I remember I was working on my case the night before. I left my documents and everything on my desk. And I was like, oh no, I have my case in an hour and I don't have any of my materials.
Mm-hmm.
So just imagine if my idea was made, and I was thinking about combining existing technologies to get that process done. Mm-hmm. Long story short, my mother had to send a driver to send those documents. I was able to get the case done, but imagine how easy it would be if my idea manifested itself into the form of a company, how quickly that process would be, and how that she wouldn't have had to call another driver to deliver those documents in person.
Yeah, because I think it almost kind of goes back to a business is more so based off of problem solving or the value you can provide versus the topic that you're passionate about. And what you said earlier too kind of goes with this. Let's say Steve Jobs, for example, like their motto was think different, right? So that was the principle, the core principle he wanted to get across. But that doesn't necessarily mean that the product you're creating is what you're passionate about. It kind of just means that you could take the principle that you're passionate about and put that into the product, kind of like how Apple makes laptops, but their motto is think different.
Now, this goes back into a couple points on my list. Sometimes you just need to start, and the destination, you'll have a small or a background looming image of where you want the destination to go. Mm-hmm. But the ladder of where you're climbing, the path is not always going to be visible. It could take all sorts of turns. Maybe you'll have an idea originally in your head, and then when you start to actually execute it in person, it will come out to be completely different, which is the whole point of Steve Jobs, is innovate, because you never know how the end product can end up being. But at the same time, you should you should have, as long as you do have your core values in place, then that's what really matters, because that is what is appealing to your niche. That is why stakeholders are also investing into you. They're doing a background check, they're doing an ethics check as well. And believe it or not, actually, Louis Vuitton, before LVMH became really big mainstream, they actually almost went out of business. I think, well, actually, no, I don't know if it was LV or if it was Burberry, but they nearly did go bankrupt because they were not sticking to their core values and what they were founded on.
Well, okay, we could keep going on entrepreneurship all night, but Josh, how much time do you think we have left?
I mean, we can talk for as long as we want. It's up to y'all.
Okay,
it's already over now.
I can keep going on this all night. Another thing that reminds me of Steve Jobs is he also claims that when you're coming out with a product, let's say, I think he said when he's coming out with the iPhone, that, because I remember I used to debate this with my marketing professors in college, that we would have arguments. I would have arguments with them over this, because I know Steve Jobs would say something and they would say the opposite. It'd make me mad. Steve Jobs would say, you don't need to identify your target market, or you don't need to claim their demographics or whatever it is. He's saying that with the iPhone, he created his own market for the iPhone, which he kind of did. And I think Elon Musk kind of did the same thing too. So how do you feel about that? How important is identifying a target market and proving that you have people that will buy your product?
I think it really depends on what you're trying to propose to the market. So if you are creating a platform, a disruptive platform like Airbnb, or if you are creating like how my idea is drone delivery, or an iPhone that combines all that at the time, it combined browsing the internet, text messaging, phone calls, using, I don't know, maps, GPS, cameras, etc., into one thing, then slowly by slowly, you are creating a platform that has the opportunity to grow and grow and grow and grow, provided it goes through that technology adoption cycle that we mentioned earlier. But slowly by slowly, as the idea then becomes a small company, gets more funding, goes through the whole cycle, it then starts to get more funding, more people are on board. As revenue goes up, the possibilities and R&D also go up. And finally, you have this company that is valued billions and billions of dollars.
Well, okay, let's say you have a theory that you believe if you create this product or service that it will provide value to people and it will make their lives easier. But the majority of people that you're talking to, whether it's business partners or whoever you're affiliating with, they're telling you there's no demand for that. People don't want that. People do not need that. And nobody's asking for that product. What do you do in that situation?
So there are some really pessimistic investors out there, and I personally have experienced this a lot. A lot of these investors that I have actually encountered are very concerned about litigations, liabilities, the possibility of lowered financial leverage and debt. So, all these pessimists, it really comes down to how well you can predict, can your business stay afloat if you cannot make sales in a quarter or two? How developed is a strategy? How developed is the business plan? What are the chances and data you have that ensure the success and the forecast of the plan itself? Having all the logistics is a big thing. And then slowly by slowly, you are able to sway more and more investors. And, some investors are only going to invest in you. Like venture capitalists, for example, are a big abdicator of this, where they want to see some sort of trace and history and existence in the market. So you already need to be established to get that big buck funding. But you do need to start if you want to be big, and let's say you require millions and millions of dollars, you need to scale your company back to the thousands range. Start small there and show the potential and the growth percentages that can be appealing to these bigger investors.
Yeah, right.
What you did say that was actually one of my questions too, but you already answered is dealing with different investors that they're kind of like on their friends, like, do I want to give my money to this person? Because we're asking people for how much with whatever money, and a lot of times they will say no, say yes, things like that. So it's good.
A lot of these investors.
Wait, let me ask you real quick. Do you have a pitch deck for your company?
You mean like an actual pitch, like a slideshow?
like a slideshow showing, yeah, like how it works and what like your plan is within, like what's the model of whatever, you know, how you're going to sell it or the profit margins or whatever.
I do.
Can I see it?
After this video, I can definitely send it to you. Yes.
Okay, awesome.
Nico, we need to get him on that.
Are you trying to buy in?
Show.
Maybe I might be.
Yeah, actually, I was gonna mention one more thing regarding Josh's point, and Nico, if you're interested, then we can sort out the terms and conditions. But a lot of investors they do come up with what's called a term sheet. You know, how shares are handled, how the equity is handled, how the payout is going to look like, how M&A is going to look like. So you know, if some, and I'm sure you guys, if you guys watch Shark Tank, you might be familiar with this as well. But there are certain terms that if an investor is not too keen in an idea, they're going to want much more enticing and persuasive terms in that company. There was a joke on Shark Tank where one investor was asking for like 80% of equity of the company, even though he knew like the company would never take off. He was offering a $10 million, 80% equity. Because he knew he was going to get his money back, and maybe he can get like a little bit of return on that after, you know, the company is sold. But you know, to another thing, especially entrepreneurs are doing, especially in the funding stages, they need to have the experience, and this only happens from company to company, dealing with these investors and negotiating the right deals. Because if you do make the wrong decision and give the wrong amount of equity, or make the wrong deal, the wrong term and condition with the wrong person, it can really bite you back in the long run.
Yeah, that is a good point. But
Josh, I didn't want to interrupt you. What were you trying to say earlier?
I don't know, but let's keep going. But no, back on that point, how do you like figure out, like how you're just saying, how do you decipher like which is a good deal or what's a bad deal, things like that?
Yeah, I mean, it comes down to calculating. In finance, we use the net present value for conducting, you know, how much funding first is needed. Can we get that? Let's say I need $1 million to make my idea happen, right? Who is going to offer me $1 million? What are the terms going to be? What do these people say about the liquidity and the opportunity in my company? What do they say about the ethics, sustainability portion of my company? What do they say about the liabilities and litigations? You know, it comes down to the terms everyone is doing. How are they going to dilute shares? You know, what is the conditions for the board of directors? Nico, I see that you raised a hand.
I wanted to ask you. Wait, now I forgot my question. Hold on. Oh, I know. I wanted to ask you. Okay, how do you balance looking for an investment on a company that, like, do you think that you need to make money first to show the model and then try to get investments, or can you say we have $0 of revenue, but we're still looking for investors though?
Are you now? Just want to expand on your question. Are you asking if the entrepreneur themselves, you know, straight out of school, like me, let's say my net worth was 0, and you know, a lot of students are like this. They come out of school, they actually come out in debt, negative net worth. But they have an idea that they want to start. And are you asking that should the investor invest in the person, or if the cash flow of the company is 0?
I'm talking about the business, not the entrepreneur.
Yeah. So yeah, this is it really depends on the investor. Now,
or what would you do? What would you do in either situation?
So,
like, would you invest in a company?
There are different investors for depending on what your valuation is at. So if your valuation is $0, and let's say you don't need too much money to start, you can actually take the money out. Let's say the startup cost was only like $50,000. You could actually take that out and leverage. If you have a good enough pitch, you can leverage friends, family, and fools. Fools meaning, like, you know, people that just blindly believe your idea. Generally, they lose out. Some fools are actually smart and they actually make a big profit. Let's say you need $100,000, and you can go to an angel investor, you can go to crowdfunding, you could go to an accelerator like Y Combinator. Let's say you need $10 million though, and you know, the idea is is a bit more difficult to implement. That's when you go into a venture capitalist, because at the end of the day, if you do want to go public, and I'll go into this in a bit, you do need to have some sort of momentum, track record, forecasting, and just a really polished up business plan and team and background to make it appealing to these investors, because these investors, they are investing into your idea. They're investing into the plan and how the logistics and the operations and how it's executed, the people as well, and the opportunities for growth. So
But
if they
will they invest? Will they invest in that idea though? If it's strictly just an idea, like there's a huge difference between an idea with $0 of revenue and a company that is at a beginning stages that makes $100,000 a year.
Generally no.
What'd you say, Josh?
I said that might also depend on the investor though too.
Yeah.
Generally, if an idea is just an idea and there's nothing to go off of it, if it's not even in the formal business plan.
Well, no, let's say not just, I don't mean like a generic, just an idea. I mean, like, let's say it's just a PowerPoint. Like,
so it has a valuation of zero.
It doesn't necessarily have to have a valuation of zero. Like, let's say they made a PowerPoint. They're showing you how they're going to make money and all this stuff and how the profits are going to come in, but they just actually haven't executed. Like maybe they're saying we need $1 million to start.
It depends on the investor then, because some investors, they will give you, if provided you can meet the right terms with them, they will give you some sort of funding. Specifically, this is what like a big pioneer of this is crowdfunding, is angel investors and using friends and family, and fools, of course. But
well, okay. Here's a problem though. This is the problem, and this is increasingly more dramatic in these last 10 years or so, both with private companies and going into public companies too. The companies that need those big upfront investments, and they say let's say we're going to be profitable in 5 years from now or 10 years from now. Sometimes it's even longer. What happens when those VC firms just keep throwing millions and millions or $100 million plus into these companies that never report a profit?
Yeah, so there is a problem where the company can become overvalued, and conversely, this actually happens a lot in fintech startups, where they get thrown all this cash and they get considered a unicorn. The valuation goes past $1 billion. And then before you know it, all the investment just pops. So moving with the investor needs to do their own research, seeing where the idea can be implemented and their own forecasts of how successful the idea can be based off their team, the business plan, how the execution is going to be. Alternatively, the startup owner can also seek to get a loan from a bank. And if the bank is going to have this maturity date and interest charged to it, so they will make their money back unless the person defaults on their loan. Then that will impact their credit, that will impact their FICO, their terms with the bank, their relationship with these investors. Another thing is if their credit score is through the roof, or if it's not good, investors will see this, and that will make the person very unlikely to get some kind of funding. So the
way I feel about this though is some companies like DoorDash, Uber, Snowflake, Twilio, some of these companies get $10 billion valuations, $20 billion valuations, but they still can't report a profit. Like Uber did like $9 billion of revenue and they had $0 of net income. So I feel like if you're that big of a company, you're already scaled, you already got $1 billion of funding over the course of however many years, and you still can't come out with a profit, that means you shouldn't be a business then. If you can do if you do $8 billion of revenue and you don't make a single dollar of profit, that means you should not be in business.
I see what you are trying to say, but there are times, especially during macroeconomic failure, recessions, where a company simply cannot make profit because they're too busy paying off their debt.
Yeah.
Maybe they're getting more financing, their liabilities are going up like crazy. But they can still generate cash by selling off the assets if they have some sort of liquidity in their company. And this is generally used to avoid, to pay off their shareholders, to maintain proper leverage in the market. There are many ways that, in a chief financial officer's perspective, where they can adjust some of the financials to make these deals. And this also happens in large scale investments, like buying a new factory, like putting in a lot of money into R&D, provided that there is potential money and payables in there. Then investors will still invest.
Yeah, and
they see the money going in the right place.
And I understand it from the viewpoint of, let's say you're an established company who you've shown years of profitability, but then 1 year you're paying back debt or you're investing in a new facility and your free cash flow, your net income is negative. That is totally understandable. But it's not if you've never reached profitability before and you've been losing money for 2 decades, I don't see how that's a good business model.
No, then in that case, then the earnings, if the company was public, then the earnings per share would go down drastically, and that once overvalued company would slowly lose its place in the market and end up.
Yeah, but the problem with that though is even with negative net income, negative EPS, the valuations, I've seen valuations go to $40 billion, $50 billion in the market.
These are overinflated companies.
Yeah, they're
overinflated. They don't have growth potential. And if you look at the relative strength index of these companies, it's going to be very, very low. It's going to be very, very overvalued. So that's when the bubble starts popping.
Right, and that was
a terrible buy.
Right, and that was when the stock market was hot and money was cheap, and things were flowing a lot nicer. Today, now with interest rates up and stuff, now you really see all these bubbles starting to pop, and these companies definitely can't afford the debt that they had 2 years ago or 3 years ago. So it's even worse. So I don't know. I think there's an issue there with just throwing.
Not only will they not be able to afford the debt, but they will actually incur even more debt because if they were to take out, let's say they don't have the cash on hand to pay off some of their debt or to fund some of their projects, then they're going to need to take out some more loans. And if they do that, the interest expense that they're incurring is going to be going up like crazy with higher interest rates. Yep. So their debt to equity is going to go up immensely. So one that looks very unattractive to shareholders. Their earnings per share and stock price are going to go down like crazy. Shareholders will have if they are taking out loans to pay off dividends, if they are giving out dividends, then these are all indicators for, at some point, if I was an investor in a company that was overvalued, I'm going to have to get rid of that as soon as possible. Otherwise, the stock, while it goes up and down in the market and can make money, at some point that company is just going to pop, go to zero, and you lose all your money. That's what happened with Terra Luna.
Yeah. All right, let's look at Snowflake stock. This is a good example. In February, about 1 year ago, this stock was $311. Today, the stock is $150. So honestly, that's not as bad as some of the other ones out there. But some of the stocks, they fall 70 or 80% because how you said
look
things.
at Carvana.
Okay, that's a good example too. That's a good example too. I don't know if Carvana ever reported were they ever profitable though? Yeah, I know Carvana is a huge drop too, $360 to $10 today. But let's see. Did they ever report? Because that's what the point I'm trying to get at is the companies that are purely surviving off of loans or funding or whatever it is. Not they just keep doing that without any profits. Let's see.
Yeah, I mean, again, with any company, if you need to have the right support in, and you need to have the right forecasts in to really take off. Otherwise, your bubble's going to pop. And
yeah, so Carvana never had profits either. So that means they got
2018?
No, they never were profitable. They never reported a profitable year. So that means their valuation had to be, what is it? It's about $2 billion now at $10 a share. So that means what's 36 times 2 is 72. So that means they were valued at $72 billion with $0 of profit.
Sheesh.
How interesting. Or FTX is another good example too.
Yeah. But unfortunately, I'm actually nearing the limit of my time for tonight.
All good.
To see some other projects.
Did you find a charger?
Any last minute comments though?
Yeah. Did you get a charger for your laptop?
I did.
Okay, good.
My laptop is at 100% right now, so
Okay, good.
I actually need to do some work on that after this.
All right. Well, I think we got a nice, almost 2.5 hours worth of podcast to put out there.
Yeah. That I will be editing. So, yeah.
Well, Nico, Josh, thank you so much for having me. And at some point, I'd love to do this again if you would have me.
Hey, it was great having you. You now hold the all-time record for the longest podcast on Stock Talk with Josh and Nico.
Thank you all for tuning in for episode 45 of Stock Talk with Josh and Nico. Thank you all once again. Have a good one. Be safe. Nico, you got any final comments before we go?
I would recommend watching All American.
Is that it?
It's on Netflix.
All right, people. To greener days ahead, everyone. Bye-bye.
No, I'm going to say to greater days ahead.
Okay, he says greener, I say greater. Bye-bye.